Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Hope you are doing well. Today we are going to start a very important topic regarding respiratory physiology, and we will cover this topic in three lectures. This is the first of three, and we will discuss the physiology of high altitude. What are the different body mechanisms at high altitude? How do we get acclimatized at higher altitudes? So we will learn what is meant by the term acclimatization and what are the short-term and long-term adaptations that occur during acclimatization. So these are the two learning objectives for our today's discussion. What is acclimatization and what are the short-term and long-term changes during acclimatization? So before we begin, you should know that the French physiologist and the British physiologist Paul Burt and John Haldane, respectively. These two gentlemen worked extremely hard on high altitude physiology, and you must have heard the name Haldane before when you discuss the Haldane effect. So Bohr effect and Haldane effect. So this Haldane effect is named after this gentleman, John Haldane. He is known as the father of oxygen therapy. So these are some normal values that you must memorize before moving on. And here you can see the comparison between the atmospheric air and the air pressure and concentration inside our alveoli. So you can see the concentration in percentage as well as the partial pressure. As far as the atmospheric air is concerned, almost 78% concentration is comprised by the nitrogen gas, 20 to 21% is oxygen, 0.04% is carbon dioxide, and the partial pressure of atmospheric air is 760 millimeters of mercury. This is the normal partial pressure value. Out of this 760, 597 is comprised by nitrogen and 159 by oxygen. Only 0.3 millimeter mercury is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So you must memorize these values not only in the atmospheric air but also in the alveoli. If you compare these values with the alveolar air, you can see slight differences. The partial pressure for nitrogen drops from 597 to 569. Similarly, for oxygen, it is 104. Now this value is important. 104 millimeters of mercury. This is the partial pressure of oxygen inside our alveoli. Now, if we compare the PO2 value of, sorry, if we compare the PCO2 value in the atmospheric air, it is around 0.3. However, inside the alveoli, the PCO2 is around 40. So this is the main difference. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide is much higher in the alveoli, although the total partial pressure is the same, 760 millimeters of mercury. So these are some normal values, some physiological values that we must memorize, especially the values of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So you have to memorize the partial pressure as well as the concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide, both in the atmosphere as well as inside the alveoli. Now this figure is taken from your textbook. Again, you can see the different values in millimeters mercury. This is the comparison between breathing air and breathing pure oxygen. So we have discussed the air values already. These are the normal values. The atmospheric pressure is around 760 millimeters mercury, and out of this 760, 159 is the PO2. As far as the PCO2 in the alveoli is concerned, the PCO2 in the alveoli is 40 at sea level. Remember these values at sea level. All these values that we have discussed so far, these are at sea level. Now, if we move from sea level to high altitude, suppose 20,000 feet. So, at 20,000 altitude in feet, you can see the change in the PCO2. So, the PO2, which was earlier in alveoli, was 104 millimeters mercury. It has now dropped to 40. So, this drop in PO2 inside the alveoli is due to high altitude. So as we ascend, obviously the oxygen levels they drop. So around 20,000 feet, the PO2 in the alveoli it drops from the normal value of 104 at sea level to 40 millimeters at 20,000 feet. Now the values which are written in small brackets, these are the values in acclimatized person. So person who has already acclimatized to high altitude. We will learn what is meant by acclimatization. Now, if we compare the values of unacclimatized to that of acclimatized person, suppose at sea level, the PO2 in the alveoli is 104 millimeters mercury, and at 20,000, it is 40. Now, this 40 millimeter mercury is in an unacclimatized person, a person who hasn't adapted to high altitude. Now, if we compare this with the value in acclimatized person, a person who has already adapted to high altitude, so although there is drop in the PO2 levels, but the drop is not as drastic. So it is around 53. So why there is the difference in the PO2 value in acclimatized and unacclimatized person? This difference is due to increase in the pulmonary ventilation. So what is meant by the term acclimatization? Sorry. So in simple words, acclimatization refers to all the changes in our body in response to hypoxia, especially when a person who has been living at sea level, he ascends to high altitude and stays there for a long time. So all the body changes in response to hypoxia, whether the changes are short term or long term. So when you ascend to high altitude, when you rise above the sea level, around 20,000 feet, 40,000 feet, so there is drop in the oxygen level. We call it as hypoxia. So the response of our body to hypoxia is acclimatization, right? And the normal atmospheric pressure at sea level, this is around 760 millimeters of mercury. Now, if we denote this pressure in centimeters of water, this is 0 centimeters of water. So 0.7 centimeters of water is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. This is the normal atmospheric pressure at sea level. So all the body changes, whether short term or long term, in response to hypoxia at high altitude is acclimatization, right? So I have observed that students are very weak in graphs for some reason, and they tend to skip the graphs. So please do not skip graphs. You have to discuss, you have to understand the important graphs. And in this graph, you can see the altitude on the abscissa, the x-axis, and the oxygen saturation is represented on the ordinate axis or the y-axis. So there are two curves. The blue curve is the curve when we breathe air, right? Air containing all the contents. And the red curve is the curve when we breathe only oxygen, right? So this is the comparison when we when we breathe air containing all the components, all the gases, and when we inhale pure oxygen only. So let's focus on the blue curve first. So you can see at around an altitude of 10,000 feet. This is 10,000 feet. So around 10,000 feet, the arterial oxygen saturation is almost normal, close to normal. You can see if we trace it down like this, almost normal oxygen saturation is there, 90% or close to 100. So if we move from left to right, if we ascend, there is no significant drop in the arterial oxygen saturation. No significant drop in the arterial oxygen saturation till the level of 10,000 feet altitude. Now this is the cutoff point. Beyond 10,000 feet, if we ascend further from 10,000 feet to, let's say, 20,000 feet. So what you can observe, a drastic fall in arterial oxygen saturation. So the oxygen saturation, which was around 90%, 90-95% earlier at 10,000 feet, at 23,000 it is dropped to half of its original value, right? So from 100 or 90%, it has dropped to half of its original value at 23,000 feet. Now, if we compare this blue curve with the upper curve given in red, this is the curve when we breathe pure oxygen. So blue curve was the curve when we breathe air, and the red curve is the curve when we breathe pure oxygen. So if we compare this red curve with the blue curve, you can see the plateau phase is much longer. So if we ascend to high altitude, if we move from left to right, the plateau phase is much longer in duration. So there is no drop in the arterial oxygen saturation, and we can rise as high as around 30,000 feet altitude. So this is the difference between breathing in pure oxygen and breathing simple air. So no fall in arterial oxygen when we breathe pure oxygen. But if we rise beyond this level, let's say around 47,000, this is 47,000 feet altitude. So at 47,000 feet, the arterial oxygen suddenly drops from 100 to 90, it drops to half of its value. This means this 47,000 feet altitude, this is equal to that of 23 when we breathe in simple air. So this is known as the ceiling or the cap. So the ceiling for an aviator who is in an unpressurized plane is around 23,000 feet. So remember the value, 23,000 feet is the ceiling for an aviator in an unpressurized plane who is breathing simple air. Now if we compare this with the person who is in an unpressurized plane and breathing pure oxygen, so the ceiling or the cap is around 47,000 feet. So the altitude is much higher. So we can say the ceiling for an aviator who is sitting in an unpressurized plane is much higher as compared to, to an aviator who is breathing simple air. So if you understood this graph, then we can proceed. Please let me know. This is the comparison between an aviator who is in an unpressurized plane. Aviator 1 is breathing simple air. Aviator 2 is breathing pure oxygen, right? And there's a limit to it, there's a cap, and we call it as the ceiling. So the ceiling for an aviator who is in an unpressurized plane and breathing simple air is around 23,000 feet. And the ceiling for an aviator who is in an unpressurized plane and breathing pure oxygen, the ceiling is around 47,000 feet. So the blue curve is the curve when we breathe simple air. The red curve is the curve when we breathe pure oxygen. So you can see there is no significant drop in the blue curve till the level of 10,000 feet. The arterial oxygen saturation remains close to normal. But beyond that, beyond 10,000, it significantly drops to half of its value, around 23,000. Whereas the red curve shows the oxygen saturation when we breathe pure oxygen. And the plateau phase of red curve is much longer. The ceiling is much higher. So no significant change in the arterial oxygen saturation till the level of 30,000 feet. And beyond that, again, we see a significant drop, and the ceiling is around 47,000. So acclimatization is the response of our body to hypoxia. Hypoxia at high altitude. So when we ascend, obviously the levels of oxygen they drop, and we call it as hypoxia. Hypoxia is fall in oxygen in the tissues, and the response to this hypoxia at the high altitude, whether short term or long term, is acclimatization. So these are the acute effects of hypoxia. So if we ascend at uh, till the level of 12,000 feet, the symptoms they begin to appear. 12,000 feet, the symptoms appear. The initial symptoms are very mild, and the person may complain of drowsiness, easy fatigability, sometimes nausea, vomiting, or mild headache may be there. So at 12,000 feet, the symptoms are very mild. But when you ascend further, more than 18,000 feet, this is critical, and the person may experience twitching of muscles or muscle seizures. And this is the critical value greater than 23,000 feet. This is the critical value, and altitude greater than that sometimes lead to permanent coma or even death. So this is the graphical representation of the same thing. The altitude is given in meters in this figure, and you can see the arterial oxygen saturation on the ordinate axis in percentage. So when you move from left to right, you are ascending. So the symptoms are very mild at 2000 meter, and they are moderate at 4000 meter, and severe at 6000 meters. So you can see initially there is a drop in the visual acuity, there is decrease in the postural stability, and when you rise higher than 40,000 meters altitude, the ability to recall is compromised. And at 6,000 meter, there is decreased reaction time as well. So these are the sensory and cognitive functions. All these cognitive functions, all these sensory functions are compromised when you ascend to high altitude. Again, at sea level, you must remember the normal value. The barometric pressure is around 760 millimeters of mercury. Remember this value. At sea level, the pressure is around 760 millimeters mercury. So this 760 millimeters of mercury is equal to 0 centimeters of water. So at sea level or water level, it is 0 centimeters of water. Remember like that. At the level of water, it is 0 centimeter of water, and 0 centimeters of water is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. And the PO2 at the sea level is around 159. Now, if you ascend, the symptoms are initially mild at around 5,000 or 10,000, and around 15,000 they become moderate. At 20,000 there is severe hypoxia, and around 23,000 or 25,000, this is the critical altitude. Remember, around 23,000 feet, this is the critical altitude. So initially, the person may complain of nausea, vomiting sometimes, headache, easy fatigability. These are the initial symptoms that the patient may experience. But at higher altitude, the symptoms they worsen progressively. Sometimes muscle twitching may start, muscle seizure may start, and around 25,000, greater than 25,000 or 30,000, the person may go to permanent coma or sometimes death due to extreme fall in the PO2 value. So this is the definition again. Acclimatization. This is an English word. Do search this word in Oxford Dictionary. But in medical term, this acclimatization refers to the changes in our body in response to hypoxia, in response to long-term exposure to hypoxia. Remember the word long-term exposure to hypoxia. So we can divide or categorize all these acclimatization changes or adaptations into short-term changes and long-term changes. So what are the short-term short-term adaptations. So there are two important short-term adaptations that our body makes at high altitude, and these are tachycardia and hyperventilation. Now, what is tachycardia? Increase in heart rate. Increased heart rate greater than normal for that particular age, for that particular gender. And what is hyperventilation? Hyperventilation when you breathe rapidly. When you breathe in, inhale and exhale rapidly. So these are the two short-term adaptations. Now this hyperventilation is extremely important. So at high altitude, not only the heart rate increases, but there is increase in the breathing rate as well. So why there is increase in breathing rate? This is important. So at high altitude, remember there is drop in oxygen level. So decrease in oxygen level. The PO2 falls. And if you remember the regulation of respiration, we discussed regulation of respiration last week. This is one of the chemical stimuli for the respiratory control centers. Remember the nervous regulation and chemical regulation? Do you remember? Yes, students. Do you remember the nervous and chemical regulation? So drop in oxygen is one of the chemical stimuli for the respiratory control centers. So this drop in PO2 at high altitude will stimulate which respiratory control center? Yes. Can anyone tell? This drop in partial pressure of oxygen will stimulate which respiratory? No, DRG, dorsal respiratory group of neuron, and ventral respiratory group of neuron. These two respiratory centers, they are the nervous regulators. Remember that. There are two types of regulators, nervous regulators and chemical regulators. We are discussing chemical regulation here. DRG and VRG, including pre-Botzinger complex, all these areas are nervous regulators. Here we are discussing chemical regulation, and drop in partial pressure of oxygen is one of the chemical stimuli. Yes, chemoreceptors, Hamna Javed. Which chemoreceptors? Peripheral chemoreceptors. Yes, excellent. So this is the answer. Peripheral chemoreceptors are the one which will be activated by this drop in partial pressure of oxygen. And there are two types of peripheral chemoreceptors, if you remember, the ones located in the carotid bodies and the ones located in the aortic bodies. The carotid and aortic bodies, peripheral chemoreceptors. Remember, these chemoreceptors are sometimes known as arterial receptors as well. So please do not get confused. The complete name is peripheral arterial chemoreceptors. Peripheral arterial chemoreceptors, and there are two peripheral arterial chemoreceptors, the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies. So drop in PO2 will stimulate these peripheral arterial chemoreceptors, and this will cause hyperventilation. So once the peripheral arterial chemoreceptors they become activated, they will increase the ventilation rate. So these are the two important short-term adaptations. Tachycardia, increase in heart rate, and hyperventilation, increase in ventilation rate. And the primary stimulus is drop in PO2. This is the primary stimulus at high altitude. Drop in PO2 will stimulate the peripheral arterial chemoreceptors inside the carotid and aortic bodies. So what are the long-term adaptations in acclimatization to high altitude? We have discussed the short-term adaptations, tachycardia and hyperventilation. So there are two short-term adaptation, and we can classify long-term adaptation in 5 types, and there are increase in 5 parameters. And what are these 5 parameters? Number one is the pulmonary ventilation. Increase in the pulmonary ventilation is the first of 5 long-term adaptations to high altitude. There is increase in pulmonary ventilation. Second, the cell count, they also increase, especially the red cell count. So increase in the red cell count, increase in the hemoglobin, and obviously increase in the hematocrit. All these parameters, they are interrelated. So when the RBC count increases, obviously the hemoglobin and the hematocrit values, they will rise. Thirdly, there is increase in pulmonary diffusing capacity. Pulmonary diffusing capacity or pulmonary diffusion capacity. Now, what is meant by this term? Pulmonary diffusion capacity, self-explanatory term, the capacity of a gas, whether oxygen, whether carbon dioxide, or any other gas, the capacity or the ability of any gas, oxygen, carbon dioxide, etc., to penetrate through the respiratory membrane, to diffuse through the respiratory membrane is known as the pulmonary diffusion capacity. So the pulmonary diffusion capacity for oxygen is different. The pulmonary diffusion capacity for carbon dioxide is different. For nitrogen, it is different. So here we are discussing the pulmonary diffusion capacity of which gas? Oxygen. We are focusing on hypoxia and the response to hypoxia. So we are focusing on oxygen. So the ability of oxygen gas to penetrate, to diffuse through the respiratory membrane increases. So there is increase in pulmonary diffusion capacity. So this is the third point in long-term adaptation to high altitude. Fourth point to remember is angiogenesis. Angiogenesis. You must have read this term in physiology of circulation as well, in cardiovascular system. Angiogenesis. Angio means vessels. Genesis, synthesis. Synthesis of vessels. And when we use the term angiogenesis, the correct definition is generation of new blood vessels. New blood vessels. There are blood vessels that are already inside the body, but sprouting of vessels or budding of blood vessels, one vessel sprouts into two, from two to four. So this generation or synthesis of new blood vessels is known as angiogenesis. So there is increase in the tissue capillarity due to angiogenesis. This is the fourth long-term adaptation to high altitude. And then the adaptation at the cellular level. What are the cellular changes? What are the cellular adaptations, long-term adaptation to high altitude? So there are 2 short-term changes and 5 long-term changes. Short-term adaptations include tachycardia and hyperventilation. Long-term adaptations include increase in these 5 parameters: increase in pulmonary ventilation, increase in RBC count, increase in pulmonary diffusion capacity of oxygen, angiogenesis leading to increase in tissue capillarity, and then the acclimatization at the cellular level. So these are the 5 important long-term adaptations. And now we will discuss each of them one by one. And we start with the first one, that is increase in pulmonary ventilation. Why there is increase in pulmonary ventilation during long-term adaptation to high altitude? Again, The primary stimulus remains the same, low PO2. And we have discussed low PO2 will stimulate the peripheral arterial chemoreceptors inside the carotid bodies, inside the aortic bodies. This is the primary stimulus. Remember, these peripheral arterial chemoreceptors, they do respond to other chemical stimuli like change in hydrogen and bicarbonate, etc. But the primary stimulus is PO2. So once stimulated, these peripheral arterial chemoreceptors located in the carotid bodies as well as the aortic bodies, they will cause hyperventilation. When you hyperventilate, what are you doing? You are blowing out excessive carbon dioxide out of your body. So increase in the ventilation rate will be followed by drop in PCO2. So when you hyperventilate, you are throwing excessive, you are throwing out excessive amount of carbon dioxide. So this will lead to drop in the PCO2. So you are blowing excessive amount of carbon dioxide out of your body. So PCO2 levels will drop. Not only the PCO2 levels will drop, but the pH value will rise. Understood? So this is the outcome of hyperventilation. So when you hyperventilate, you are blowing out excessive amount of carbon dioxide. The levels of carbon dioxide will increase in pH will cause alkalosis. So what is alkalosis? pH greater than 7.4. 7.4 is so we are back. Students, are you with me? Can you hear me? Sorry for the interruption. Can you hear me? All right. So we were in the middle of a very important concept before we lost connection. So these are the hazards of modern technology. That is why the orthodox method, blackboard and marker, that is the preferred one. But this is how it is. So we were discussing why there is increase in pulmonary ventilation. So I have to repeat all that again. So decrease in PO2 will stimulate the peripheral arterial chemoreceptors. Peripheral arterial chemoreceptors in the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies. once stimulated, will increase the ventilation rate. And when there is hyperventilation, you are blowing out excessive amount of carbon dioxide. So this will cause drop in the PCO2. Not only the PCO2 is decreased, but there is parallel increase in the pH value, right? And this increase in pH is known as alkalosis. Remember, alkalosis is pH greater than 7.4. So 7.4 is the cutoff value. pH less than that is acidosis. Greater than that is alkalosis. Now, this alkalosis is which type of alkalosis? Obviously, this is respiratory alkalosis. So respiratory alkalosis chemoreceptors in the carotid and aortic bodies. Once stimulated, they will cause hyperventilation. Hyperventilation will not only cause drop in the PCO2 but will cause increase in the pH value. And this increase in pH value will be labeled as respiratory alkalosis. So now how this respiratory alkalosis is compensated? Remember, whether there is acidosis or alkalosis, there is compensation by the kidneys. And how respiratory alkalosis is compensated by two mechanisms. Remember, there is increase in the pH and decrease in the PCO2 level. Now, how to minimize, how to bring this pH level back to normal? So Allah has given us a compensatory mechanism, and this compensation is done by the kidneys. So the pH value is above normal. So how to bring it back to normal? This will be done by the kidneys. And how kidneys will compensate? They will, number one, reduce the secretion of hydrogen. So, and number two, increase the excretion of bicarbonate. So the kidneys, in response to respiratory alkalosis, will make two compensatory changes. It will, number one, reduce the excretion of bicarbonate. And these two changes will bring this increased pH back to normal. So this is how compensation is done. And this compensation is done by the kidneys. So remember, out of the four acid-base disorders, the four major acid-base disorder, respiratory acidosis and alkalosis, and metabolic acidosis and alkalosis. Out of these four major acid-base disorder, remember, the respiratory alkalosis is the one which is respiratory alkalosis is compensated by the kidneys. So the pH which was above normal earlier will be brought back near normal by the kidneys by these two mechanisms: reduction in hydrogen secretion and increase in bicarbonate excretion. And this is the point to remember. So I am reading these lines for you. Important. So the respiratory centers are much more responsive to the peripheral arterial after the kidneys compensate for alkalosis. So what do we mean by this sentence? This means So we are back again. So we were discussing the sensitivity of the peripheral arterial chemoreceptors. Sensitivity to what? Sensitivity to low PO2, sensitivity to hypoxia. We know that these peripheral arterial chemoreceptors are extremely sensitive to hypoxia, but they are much more sensitive when the compensation is done by the kidneys. So they become more sensitive. So how compensation is done? We have discussed the compensation is done by the kidneys. The compensation of respiratory alkalosis. So what are the other long-term adaptations at high altitude? There is increase in the red cell count, there is increase in the hemoglobin content, and obviously the hematocrit value will also rise. So why there is increase in the red cell count, why there is increase in the hemoglobin content, and why the hematocrit value rises above the normal value? And the answer to that is erythropoietin. This is the answer. Now this chemical substance is released from the kidneys. And again, the primary stimulus for the release of erythropoietin from the kidneys is tissue hypoxia. The stimulus is the same. So tissue hypoxia will stimulate the kidneys to secrete this chemical substance erythropoietin. And as the name indicates, erythropoietin is required for erythropoiesis. That is the reason there is increase in the RBC count, there is increase in the hemoglobin content, and obviously the PCV or the hematocrit value also increase beyond normal. So we are done the two long-term adaptation, increase in the blood count, increase in the pulmonary ventilation. Then the third long-term adaptation to high altitude is increase in the pulmonary diffusion capacity. Diffusion capacity for which gas? Oxygen. Remember the normal value. This is the normal value given in red. Remember this value, 21 milliliters per millimeter mercury per minute. So what do we mean by 21 milliliter per millimeter mercury per minute? This means at the pressure of 1 millimeter mercury, 21 ml of oxygen can diffuse through the respiratory membrane in 1 minute. So this is the normal pulmonary diffusion capacity for oxygen. And if you remember the respiratory response to exercise, the pulmonary diffusion capacity during exercise also increases. And same is the case at high altitude. So from 21, it may rise to 40 or 50 milliliter. So double than normal or sometimes triple the normal. So why there is increase in pulmonary diffusion capacity? And the answer is increased capillary blood volume leading to increased capillary surface area. So, so hypoxia will stimulate the depth of inspiration as well. So not only the ventilation rate, the breathing rate increases, but the depth of breathing also increases, especially the depth of inspiration. So when you take a deep breath, this will increase the blood volume as well. This will increase the capillary surface area as well. So increase in lung air volume will cause this increase in the alveolar capillary interface. So when the interface is increased, the diffusion capacity will also increase. So this will be followed by the increase in pulmonary arterial pressure. So these are the mechanisms that are responsible for increase in pulmonary diffusion capacity for oxygen from 21 to twice its normal value or sometimes thrice its normal value. And the fourth adaptation is increase in the tissue capillarity. Why there is increase in tissue capillarity? The answer is angiogenesis. And angiogenesis means sprouting or synthesis of new blood vessels, especially in response to hypoxia. So multiple growth factors are released within the circulation, and these growth factors will cause budding or sprouting of new blood vessels. So one blood vessel will sprout to become two, and from two to four, and multiple small blood vessels, multiple small capillaries will be formed, and this will cause increase in the tissue capillarity. Again, the stimulus remains the same. Tissue hypoxia is the stimulus which causes release of multiple blood vessel growth factors. And the last adaptive change, as far as long-term acclimatization to high altitude is concerned, is the cellular acclimatization. And what are the cellular changes during acclimatization? The important cellular changes include increase in the mitochondrial cells and the oxidative cellular cells. So during acclimatization to high altitude, not only the oxygen delivery to the peripheral system is increased, but there is parallel increase in the oxygen uptake by the cell. So oxygen delivery and uptake both increases. So there is parallel increase in oxygen delivery and oxygen uptake. So to summarize our whole discussion, acclimatization is the response of our body to long-term hypoxia at high altitude. And there are two short-term adaptations, tachycardia and hyperventilation, and there are 5 long-term adaptations. We have discussed all these 5 adaptations one by one in detail. If there is any question, please let me know. Now here you can see this is the graphical representation of the same thing. You can see the changes during acclimatization before we ascend, then immediate changes after few minutes, then intermediate changes after days to weeks, and then long-term changes after months. So you can see as you move from left to right, you can see increase in the heart rate, what we call as tachycardia. Not only the heart rate increases, the ventilation rate also increases, and we call it as hyperventilation. And hyperventilation will cause excessive blowing out of carbon dioxide from the body, and this will lead to drop in the PCO2. Not only the PCO2 will drop, but also the arterial pH will increase. So this increase in pH is known as alkalosis greater than 7.4. And this type of alkalosis is respiratory alkalosis. And then there are changes or adaptations in the RBC count, in the hemoglobin content, as well as the PCV or the hematocrit value. So this is the graphical representation of the same discussion that we have discussed earlier. So if you have any question, please let me know. We still have a minute or two. Again, this is the summary. You can see different parameters on your left hand side and how the body responds to the high altitude. The response of the body is given on the right hand side. For example, at high altitude, there is drop in the alveolar PO2. Not only the alveolar PO2, but the arterial PO2 also drops from normal. So there is hypoxemia. This hypoxemia will stimulate the peripheral arterial chemoreceptors. Peripheral arterial chemoreceptors located in the carotid bodies, located in the aortic bodies, will increase the ventilation rate. Hyperventilation in response to hypoxemia will cause excessive blowing out of carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide levels will drop and there will be parallel increase in the arterial pH. And we will label it as the respiratory alkalosis in response to hyperventilation. So now this respiratory alkalosis will be compensated later on by the kidneys. How? The kidneys will reduce the secretion of hydrogen and increase the excretion of bicarbonate. Then the changes in the cellular level, increase in the RBC count, increase in the hemoglobin content, increase in the packed cell volume or the hematocrit, and then the effect of high altitude on the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve is very important. I hope you remember the normal oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. If you remember the normal, only then we can discuss the effects of high altitude. So students, do you remember the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve? Have you discussed it yet or not? Oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. No response from students, right? So I will presume that you have understood oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. So what are the effects of high altitude on this curve? So one line answer is rightward shift. Why there is shift in the right side? So when we say the oxyhemoglobin dissociation shifts to the right side, in other words, this means there is decrease in the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. Obviously, when we ascend, there is decrease in the oxygen concentration. So, in the absence of oxygen, the affinity for hemoglobin will also be compromised. This decrease affinity will cause increase in the P50 value, and the curve will shift to the right side. And then there is increase in the pulmonary vascular resistance as well as the pulmonary arterial pressure. Remember, the unique property of pulmonary circulation is the response to hypoxia. If we compare pulmonary circulation with the systemic circulation, there is opposite response to hypoxia. So whenever there is hypoxia in pulmonary circulation, the response is vasoconstriction. Now this response is opposite to that of systemic circulation. So remember this in systemic circulation, but this is the case in pulmonary circulation. So vasoconstriction will take place and this will increase the pulmonary arterial pressure as well. So have a look at this flow chart. This is the last slide for today. This is the summary of all the short-term and the long-term changes during acclimatization to high altitude, increase in the ventilation rate, one of the short-term adaptation, and then there are long-term adaptation, increase in the pH value, respiratory alkalosis. We have discussed why there is respiratory alkalosis. We have discussed how this respiratory alkalosis is compensated later on. Pulmonary circulation changes, increase in resistance and increase in pulmonary pressure, the effects on oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, and the changes in the red cell count. So this is all for today. We will continue our discussion from here tomorrow, inshallah. So that's all. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.